12, 12. ビタマークで12。ビタマープレイヤー。Spirits of those who have gone before us. You have given the gift of life in this birth and in this universe. You discharge your duties faithfully, each according to a span of years. You be remembered eternally. Your life return from generation to generation. Honor and unnatural society, and the rules of our families. Through the mysterious working of Kami, enter the Konko faith. You of the way of Konko rising. Mistaking the with the divine mind. You must greatly through your faith to take into the world beyond and leave their descendants. And that is boundless, where are many favors. Revere you as the answer spirit of our homes, our own divine spirits. Receive you, converse with us everyone. This is the favor of God, and help us to figure our tasks, our people without faith. Protect, guide us, teach us, that we never lose the way of faith, that we hand down to all the nations, that we peace and prosperity with our home. Protect us, guide us, teach us. How do you symbol presentation over to my official? Yes, sir. Thank you very much. So I asked Mitama Spirit related to this church and those attendees to join today's Tenchikana Grand Ceremony. So I hope this Grand Ceremony will be a peaceful, joyful service with Mitama Spirit. Then, so I need so for the first people. There's you can see the service order. There's a part of Tamaguchi offering. Tamaguchi offering by the attendee. Here, Tamaguchi offering. This is Tamaguchi. So we offer for to have the divine partner leave us. So you don't know how to, so I teach you. You know,
It's been a while.
No, 3 of you, I will bring. I teach. Okay.
座ってもいいな。座っていいな。
座っていいや。
いいですか。
是 OK。让他 So, 2 of you come or you come later, after. First come here. First bow. And come
clockwise.
And important is stem to the altar. Then put there. Bow.
So start here, clockwise, so 3/4 turn, and stem towards the altar.
Then, the fear,
Bow.
and bow, clap 4 times, and bow, then return to your seat. Okay? ないそう、ステム、そうだ。あ、カッチでときもいい。Solemn greeting. 一度入れ、レサルソレンリークラン4 times field. prayer of faith to mediation prayer. Page 2. Mediation prayer. Let us see the sacred mediation with Yami Konko sincerely and wholeheartedly, each and every day. May we see the mediation anew with our heart and soul on this day, this very moment. 生き神金光大臣様、生き神金光大臣様、生き神金光大臣様、生き神金光大臣様。Prayer page 3, Kami prayer. Kami prayer. Reverently we pray. The brilliance of heaven, the richness of earth, time fall without cease, the earth pass without end. In heaven, the earth is the dust and nature soul. In heaven, the earth is the truth that holds us all. For this wondrous home, for these wondrous works, let us praise the King of Kami. Let us praise the divine parent of the universe. Kami loves and cares for humanity. All those who live in heaven and earth, to revere Kami as the divine parent, to remain Kami in His blessing. This is the way. They may not know in the way, but lost in brilliant selfishness. They suffer the cycle of misfortune. Where is Kami's sorrow? Our family father Konko Daiji suffered many triumphs in this world, but help us to faith and sincerity, receive Kami's great blessing, and began the life of mutual fulfillment of Kami and humanity. Humbly we pray, the divine parent grace which has the fulfilled. Konko Daiji accepted the call to mediation. That is to the mutual benefit of Kami and humanity. By day he taught the way of faith to all who sought him, expanding the blessings of heaven and earth, and he united Kami of night. By night he prayed for those who believe, seeking salvation for all who suffered, and he knew not the glory of day. Though years passed and the world changed, he never wavered from his start. The divine task of mediation, thus are given the sacred Tenchikakisuke, the guiding principle of our daily life. The divine favor was renewed and blessing for universally, establishing the eternal prosperity. The way of mediation became Konko. By this wondrous revelation, we are given knowledge of the way, so the hardships of this world, through men, women, and souls. The way of mediation teaches us to turn our hearts to Kami, whether you are for day or night, whether we are near or far. The way of mediation teaches us to build total trust, for living from way of divine favor. We offer sincere apologies and pray to mend our faith. Let us live our faith every day, seeking and rejoicing your divine favor. Let us care for those in pain. Invite them to the way. Let us guide those who are lost. Awaken them to the full purpose. Come is within us. We are firmly in Kami. May this be our mutual fulfillment. Even in this world. May Kami be all through this. And the very many of all people are full. So we humbly pray. So we earnestly pray. Ceremony prayer by Hedwig. Let us pray. Dearest divine spirit of heaven and earth, we graciously come today with humble heart, full of joy, to celebrate the blessed life that comes to us directly from you. We know you as the divine parent of the universe through the faithful life service of Konko. Although our gratitude is profound, mere mortal words cannot begin to convey a depth of gratitude. You are blessing are infinite. You continuously shower us with everything that makes our life possible. We see the renewal of this blessing at this time of year. In the bountiful beauty of spring, birds sing, flower bloom. Heaven and earth are filled with sights, sounds, and the fragrances of the coming glory. As the earthly children, we are thrilled to offer you celebration and thanks for your profound gift of renewal in humble awe. Konko faith teaches. The divine parent of the universe sent Kami Konko Dajin to give people blessing, teaching, and opportunity to prosper forever. The divine parent is the divine parent because of people, and people are people because of the divine parent. Both continuously hold each other up. This way is revealed in the mutual reliance between Kami and people through the example of Ikami Konko Daiji. 164 years have passed since the founder received a divine call. Many people have been drawn to Ikami Konko and passed of faith in mediation, which has been passed down from generation to generation. Kami be near to us today, and rejoice with us in mutual fulfillment. The doors of this Konko Church for Chicago have seen 26 years pass since they opened to broadcast this way of faith to this great city. In that time, we have tried to deepen our peaceful and joyful heart, so that peace and joy may radiate forth to stir the heart of people in Chicago and beyond. On this beautiful May 28th, Sunday, we thank you most especially to offer our voices in the choir of commemoration of Tenchi Kanino Kamigan ceremonies. Together in that worldwide spirit, we pray your virtue, divine parent of the universe. Please receive our offering of Kivaku music and traditional ceremonial rites as a symbolic representation of a true and sincere heart. Guide us to deepen our faith by manifesting the teaching of Konko Daijin through our daily actions. With your gentle guidance, please help us truly understand the value of the life we share together. Help us see your way of the universe more perfectly. Then lead us to coexist harmoniously with the beautiful nature that surrounds us. We ask that in all our works and your humility, we may become an example in your way to achieving true peace for humankind. For the sake of human race and the world, let us pray for humans to have a heart like that of the universe to change this world into a more Kami fulfilled world. Let us live a life full of gratitude in harmony with the universe. We pray with a single heart. Please lead us all to cooperate together in respecting all the wisdom tradition of the world. Through differences, a new vision is given to see the uniqueness of your truth. Teach us to learn from each other and fulfill our beautiful our lives together. Make us your people in one human family. The novel coronavirus is still spreading in the world. The nature has been tumultuous due to the global warming, etc. We pray for all those who have lost their lives and are suffering throughout the world because of these happenings. Give all in the world the full measure of your strength and hope as we commit ourselves to stand together. Moreover, Russian invade Ukraine unilaterally and brutally kill Ukrainian civilians to the extent that it threatens the existence and dignity of humankind. We cannot help but pray that peace will come promptly and that both Ukrainian and Russian would get along well, worshipping with each other. At the same time, we humans should seek to understand the divine wishes Kami has for these sufferings. What are Kami's wishes for all of us human beings to go through such tragedy? Kami gave the following revelation to our founder on November 24, 1880. Right now, the world is human-centered. All things are done by people on power. And many people are going against my teaching. So long ago, it was the center world. Because of this, I shall teach people to return to a Kami center world. Difficulty and suffering are caused by people's own heart. Whether or not they can live in a peaceful world also depends on their own heart. Right now, the world is still human-centered. All things have been done by people's own power. You wish a human to overcome the human-centered history of several thousand years and return to a Kami-centered world. For that you wish us to single-heartedly live in peace and joy in your heart to manifest a world of mutual fulfillment between you and humanity, where divinity and humanity meet together in prayer, joy together in gratitude, and delight together in mutual satisfaction. Pray, bless us today through this service. May we be energized by your divine spiritual power. May your blessing be with those who are unable to attend, but are praying with us in spirit here as well. Who has your joyful, peaceful, and harmonious universal spirit. We carry this spirit in our heart into the future. You have shown time and time again that if people suffer don't receive divine blessing, Kami's purpose cannot be fulfilled. As Konko believers, guide us to become human of reflections of your love for people throughout the world, so that your divine virtue may be fulfilled. Help us embrace this world in this divine way of heaven and earth. We pray that this celebration may be the springboard from which Kami Church will grow and prosper here in the heartland of America. Thank you. As you. Symbolic presentation of the Christian Hamas. prayer of phase 6. Restoration of Pentacles. Prayer 6. 生き神金光大人天地金の神真に願えおかげは心にあり今月今日で頼めい Pray sincerely with your heart be one with God and this blessing being within however and carry in harmony and joy Look to coming always now forever on this very day pray. 下地プレゼントの人はバイガーデンに玉虫バイガーデン First, today's speaker, Mrs. Ashton Kish, Assistant Minister from Konko Church of Chicago. We have page 56. Him, shining or Kanya, human. Real life. Shining or Kanya, real life. 56. Human heart in the arms of coming, we are coming, beloved children, in the boundless virtue of coming, we are given life. How happy we are. We are saved by Him. Concording to the bound, life that is eternal. To come, children, oneness be my favor. We are saved by Him. How happy we are. Please be seated. Speech by Mrs. Ashton Fish, Minister Assistant of Konko Church of Chicago.
Can you get my iPad out? I'm standing right here. I keep my lips chapped. Otherwise, I start my voice starts to crack. Okay. Hi, everybody. How are you today? I take a medication that makes my mouth dry, so it makes it easy to breathe, so I'm pretty thankful for it. Okay. Okay, so good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all. And I feel we're so blessed to be gathered again like this. We haven't been together since November of 2019 when Chicago held its anniversary celebration. At that time, I was attending university to get my biology degree in the hopes that I could one day go to medical school, become a doctor of palliative care. It was a big dream, but I was dedicated to taking those steps and seeing where I ended up. I thought, at the very least, if I followed my desire, I would arrive at a good place, a degree where I could help people do science and do work that fulfilled me, even if I didn't make it to medical school. This desire to become a doctor had started back in 2017, when I began to learn more about end-of-life decisions, something I'd already had some experience in. I had thought about it often over 6 years after the death of my best friend, Kevo Buck, to a car accident on November 26, 2010. Suddenly, his family was faced with difficult decisions, and being so young, he never really talked about his end-of-life wishes. However, I knew what was meaningful to him in life. His father ended up pulling me aside and asked me a very heavy question for a just turned 20-year-old. Should we let him go? He was in a coma at the time, and the doctors weren't sure that he would make it due to his brain damage. And if he did, he wouldn't be the same. He would very likely be unable to walk, have any independence, think the same way, speak properly. I knew Kevo very well, his dreams, his personality, the things he valued and cherished in life. And I knew, with all my heart, that he wouldn't want to live like that, even if I wanted him to wake up. In that moment, Kami-sama and Kevo were telling me the answer. I told his father without hesitation, even if there was a chance, he would reject living like that. His freedom is paramount. We can't tightly hold on to him, no matter how badly we want him back. I didn't realize how much this moment of clarity would have an effect on my life. Kevo became a precious mitama-sama for all of us, even to people he never knew, saving their lives with organ donation. My friends and I did many things to honor his memory, including getting stickers of a KB that we took everywhere and pasted in places to show where he'd been. His father enjoyed seeing us grow and live as much as we could in Kevo's honor. He also swore many times that Kevo made visits to him in very obvious and specific ways. Although it was so hard to lose him, and the grief stays with us still, I am still wholly convinced that the right thing was decided then. Modern medicine is wonderful, amazing scientific advancements made in great strides. However, it can't fix everything. I didn't realize then, but I was making a palliative care decision with Kevo's father. I was honoring the concept of quality over quantity. In 2017, I was spending time as basically a housewife, taking care of the house and spending time as a moderator for a very niche role-playing game called Space Station 13. In that game, everyone can play a profession to make a spaceship or station run fluidly, and funnily enough, all the characters I played were doctors, nurses, or medical chemists. The same thing often happened when I played any game, always playing an herbalist or a healer character. I suppose it had always been obvious that helping people was something I was drawn to do. Another thing I liked to do in my free time was watching frontline documentaries on the PBS website. I learned so much from them, but one in particular changed my life. Titled Being Mortal, the documentary was based on the book of the same name. The documentary talked about the topic of end of life, palliative care as a rising movement, and matters surrounding such things. Direct and unapologetic, doctors in the documentary stated firmly, medicine is amazing. We are reaching a plateau. People are dying in pain because of the mindset of do anything to keep them alive, losing quality of life in exchange for quantity. Instead of fearing death, we needed to begin to face it honestly, knowing what we wanted, knowing what our dreams were, knowing what life-saving measures meant, and if we were willing to endure the pain of such measures to give us a shot at having more time, or if we were willing to exchange that quantity for comfort, peace, and the ability to speak and be with the people we love. I was inspired by this area of medicine so much that I watched this documentary 3 times, trying to understand what it was that was stirring in me. There was a certain doctor that was my inspiration in the documentary, Kathy Selvagi. When she was introduced, my mind was saying, what if I could be like her? And this is a transcript from that documentary. Kathy Selvagi, palliative care specialist. First of all, I think it's important that you ask what their understanding is of their disease. I think that is first and foremost, because oftentimes what we say as physicians is not what the patient hears. If there are things you want to do, let's think about what they are and how we can get them accomplished. The writer of that book Dr. Atul Gawande responds. People have people have priorities besides just living longer. Yes. You've got to ask what those priorities are. Yes. Then you've got to tune the treatment to those priorities. Exactly. And if we don't ask, and if we don't have these discussions, we won't ever know. She moved me. I wanted to be able to help someone in the way she did. Help them realize how important it was to consider death as a piece of one's life. Maybe I could become a doctor. At that time, I wasn't sure I was able to do it. I remember when I told my husband about my dream, I cried because I knew it would be hard, expensive, and maybe impossible. They were tears of fear and happiness. The only thing I could think was that if I tried, Kami-sama would help me and at least guide me to where I was supposed to be. The first thing I did in my inspiration was volunteer at the local hospital. It felt nice to be in that environment, inspiring in a way. Talking with patients was meaningful, and it was nice to be able to give them small comforts where I could. Pause. It's an announcement. In 2019, around the time of the anniversary Taisai, I was in the thick of it. It's funny, if you go back and look at the pictures, one day is school materials, the next is the Taisai, and right after is pictures of organic chemistry notes. I had won a scholarship to my university, but I had to maintain essentially perfect grades to keep it. It was around that time that it was discovered that I had narcolepsy, a disorder where one's circadian rhythm is no longer functional, and a person can enter REM sleep at any moment. A teacher noticed it when I was asleep, but still taking notes. It was also around this time that I began to research more intensely what being in medical school meant, what it took to make it and not fail. What I saw made me nervous. The level of competition was mind-boggling. Essentially every hour of every day was spent studying. The average student loan was as much as a house, and people had to live on these loans. The medical test, to even be considered by schools, the MCAT, was 6 months of study alone. Not to mention the quality of medical students' lives is fairly low. Ask medical students. Mental illness is rampant. Depression and anxiety is so high that mental breakdowns are really common. Some schools have had to, and this is kind of sad, put up barriers in some parts of buildings because of how often certain students would jump out of windows or off of buildings. I thought, it was already so difficult to maintain the level of dedication that I did right now, and the expectations of medical school was double the workload of what I was doing right then. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to handle medical school mentally or physically. However, I decided that I would keep pushing to try. After all, what could I say if I didn't even try? Then, as we all know too well, COVID came into our lives. The pandemic changed everything. Right in the beginning of my last year of school, this massive upheaval. Now to be clear, I was the type of person that always woke up very early and went to school of my own accord to use the quiet morning hours before classes started to do homework and study for tests. I would wake up at 5:45 and go to school just so that I had quiet time. Suddenly, I couldn't do that any longer. And if anybody who has ever struggled with ADHD knows, routine is key to success. Now all routine was gone, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to graduate. However, Kami-sama blessed me with professors who advocated for me and helped me endure. Another thing that happened due to the pandemic, however, was a sudden, intense honesty all over the internet from doctors, medical students, and medical professionals. When I was reading about all this, I really truly wondered if I had been in their shoes right at that moment, this moment in COVID, could I have done it? The answer inside me was no, because more and more the pandemic, and in it I felt Kami-sama too, was training me to understand what quality of life meant. One thing during the pandemic that we were allowed to do at school was come into the lab and do independent research. So when the time came for me to propose a project, I wasn't really sure what I would do. However, I understood about myself that doing something meant learning it more completely. I had struggled with in my genetics class a bit, so I told my mentor that I wanted to shore up my weakness in that regard with my project. Well, do you like plants? She asked me. Well, sure, but I haven't taken any classes about plants my entire degree. That's fine. I think you can pick it up. And pick it up I did. Going into the lab, getting out of the house, felt like such a blessing. I loved being there. I thanked Kami-sama constantly for that time. When I thought about the work I was doing at the bench, I remember thinking, you know, I could do this sort of thing for the rest of my life and be happy. I love working with these plants, and I love learning so much about them. I sort of had a realization at that moment that this is what it felt like to be one with Kami in the divine reminder. I felt joy, peace, gratitude, and care for the work I was doing. I would always pray in the same way to Kami-sama. I make my request, but I always end it with, but you know what's best, so please help me achieve what you think is best for me. At first I wasn't really sure how this could help people. It seemed really far from the dream I had set out for myself. But I figured out what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a plant scientist. Still, despite being successful and finding something that really fulfilled me, even working on technologies now that will help people in the future, I still couldn't forget my dream. I supposed I would never achieve it. It felt a little embarrassing that I didn't make it. And though I didn't feel like a failure, after all, I set out to get a degree and I got one. I still wondered if my passion was really just some misguided illusion. I was sure a lot of people were probably let down that I wasn't pursuing this goal of medical school. Still, I never regretted it. I trusted that I was in exactly the right place because I prayed and followed what I felt Kami-sama's signs were. At the time, I feel Kami-sama knew something that I didn't. Funnily enough, there was one person in my life who thought that medical school was a bad idea for me because she thought I wouldn't be very happy doing it. My granny. She never rejected the idea, but I remember how she said she was relieved that I wasn't going away to medical school somewhere else and was doing something interesting and fulfilling work right here. When I learned about palliative care back in 2017 and began to understand more about it, one of the first things I did was have a conversation with my grandmother about her end-of-life wishes. I was always very close to my granny, so we always had these kinds of candid conversations about anything. And she told me everything, every detail. She had a lot of wishes and knew exactly what she wanted. I carefully wrote them all down and stored them on a document that I could access on any device, just in case. If I start crying, it's not my fault. She then said to me, you know, you are the first and only person to have ever asked me this. Nobody's ever tried to have this talk with me. It's like they think I'll live forever, but I won't. I'm getting old. I'm just really grateful you asked, honey. I really feel like you care. Even more, a couple years later, she made me her power of attorney, saying, if I'm ever stuck in the hospital, you know exactly what to do. I felt deep gratitude for her trust and great responsibility too. At that time, I was still thinking I would become a doctor. Funny enough, if I had ended up in medical school like I had hoped, I would have missed this very crucial moment. In April of 2022, my granny was suddenly hospitalized after what was supposed to be a routine visit with her heart doctor. Her heart was weak. She had felt out of breath, but wasn't entirely sure why. The medication she'd been on for 30 years started to fail. And so they started her on a new medication. And even though they were certain she needed a pacemaker, it was required by insurance that they send her home with a life vest on her for at least a month. A device that was worn 24/7 that would restart her heart if it stopped. I think they failed to really recognize the stress she was under due to the new medication and this vest. Because when she returned home that night, she had a heart attack that left her very weak. Returning to the hospital, they worked to get a pacemaker in her right away. However, I sensed something wasn't right about all this. A heart attack, I knew, was damaging. People took a very long time to recover from it, and she was 87, meaning it would only be a long, tiring process for her. After the surgery was completed, I asked to be called right away as soon as she was in the recovery ICU. When I arrived, I was immediately met with a very difficult sight that brought me to tears. She was being intubated, put on a breathing tube, and she was struggling a lot, looking like she was being choked. I knew that that was the reality of a breathing tube from my research in palliative care. No speaking, no breathing for yourself, and feeling you have to entirely give up your breathing to this machine. Not to mention the bruising and pain it causes in the throat. She'd been on it once before her bypass surgery, so she knew the drill. Luckily this time, it was only for one day. The next day when she was off, she looked at me and she said, "Honey, I can never do one of those things ever again." And I reassured her that she would never have to. The week that went by was difficult. She wasn't getting better. She kept saying, "I don't know, my heart has been working really hard for a long time, and I don't think it wants to keep going much longer." And that was true. She wasn't healing or taking to any of the medications. Her stay was getting harder. She was only getting weaker. And I was spending 16-hour days with her near the end because I hated the idea of her being alone. Still, she was lucid, chatting happily about memories with Patrick and I, telling me her favorite songs and the poems she would want read at her funeral. She talked about her fears, hoping that God would think she was a good person and would accept her. We talked openly about these things. And she had me make the call to everyone and let them know to come see her before the end. Near the end, the doctor suggested one final surgery to see if something could be done. She asked if she'd have to be put on the breathing machine again, and they said yes. And when they said yes, I'll never forget the way she grabbed my hand and looked at me and said, "Honey, don't let them put me on that thing ever again. I won't do it again." I reassured her that she wouldn't do it again. I said to the doctor that I didn't think another surgery was a good idea, that her quality of life was most important right now. This just seemed like a futile effort to prolong the inevitable. He agreed. He seemed almost relieved that I said that. This man had been my grandmother's heart doctor for 40 years. He told her it was an honor to know her, and they said their farewells. However, I didn't realize at the time that that moment wouldn't be the actual test. I prayed sincerely to Kami-sama that I was making the right choice in advocating for my granny in this way. Every time I wondered, Kami-sama always blessed me with an answer like that. The last 2 days was perhaps the biggest trial, but I prayed and prayed. Family showed up to see her, and she was alert and lucid enough to speak to them all. If she'd gotten that second surgery and been on the breathing machine, I knew she wouldn't have had these moments because her voice would have been taken away from her. I remember how she asked me not to leave. It was the Saturday night before Mother's Day, and she said she really, really didn't want to be alone. I knew these things were going to rely on the Mercy ICU staff, since they didn't usually let visitors stay past 10. I prayed the divine reminder before going to the desk and explained my grandmother's request. One of the nurses said, "You've been such a huge help, and this is important to her, so I think we can let you stay." I think they really appreciated the fact that they just had somebody caring for my grandmother and easing up their burden a bit. They managed to pull together a makeshift bed for me, and I laid next to my grandmother that night, holding her hand. She just wanted to know that I was there. She woke up every once in a while and asked if I was still there. When her caretaker and my mom's friend, who is also my mom's friend, my grandmother knew her since she was very little, showed up early on Sunday morning to spend time with my granny and do her hair for her. My grandmother was always very insistent on having her hair done and looking nice. She told me to go home for a bit and get some sleep. However, that was where the test really began. Once I left the hospital, my aunt got wind of the second surgery idea and started demanding that everything be done to potentially save my granny's life. And my aunt also had joint power of attorney. The caretaker called me, scared for what was going to happen, since my granny had been convinced it wouldn't be right to pass away on Mother's Day, of all days. With only an hour of sleep under my belt, I had to drive back to the hospital to start advocating for my grandmother's comfort again. My aunt and I are close, but we argued a little bit. I was so exhausted and I didn't know what to do. It felt like I was being overruled because I was younger, and my aunt thought I was being rash, even though I had spent so much time with my granny and we'd come to this conclusion together. I remember feeling weak in that moment, unsure of what to do, so I just prayed desperately to Kami-sama that the right thing would be done. And at that moment, like literally seconds later, my granny's renal doctor showed up. She was a stern little woman, but I had talked to her a lot through this whole process and was very grateful for her direct method of speaking. Granny was too. Essentially, the medications keeping my granny alive in the ICU were damaging her organs, specifically her kidneys and her liver. According to this doctor, their function was basically gone at this point. And even if my granny lived through her second heart surgery, she would have to have dialysis every day for the rest of her life. So the doctor appeared like almost a wrathful angel and spoke to my aunt. She told her, "People make this mistake too often, and I have to watch it. She's lucid and awake and comfortable right now. You will lose that, and so will she if you go through with this. Her life will never be the same. It will be painful. You might take a shot at getting more days, but what kind of days are those? I can tell you they're not good ones." Quality over quantity. Hearing it from a professional, we thanked the doctor and she walked off. I desperately thanked Kami-sama for making her appear right then. Returning to my grandmother's room, I talked to her about what the renal doctor told us, and she said, "She's right. She's always been very good to me. I don't want dialysis or anything less than what I had before. But it's Mother's Day." And I said, "Yeah, Granny, it's your day. You get to be selfish. You can do whatever you want, and we can't say nothing about it." She teared up and smiled to me and said, "Yeah, you're right. I'm tired. I need a rest." When I took her off the medications about an hour later, it was entirely peaceful. She passed so quickly, it was like she just went to sleep for a little while and slowed down more and more. She took one last breath, and we were all there with her. It was exactly how any palliative care doctor would have envisioned a good end. Around the time before the very end, I asked a nurse about her vitals, and he took me aside and showed me his screen. During that time, he said, "By the way, thank you for advocating so strongly for her. I've seen a lot of people die here, and I've seen a lot of people make extreme decisions that only caused a lot of suffering because they didn't know what do everything means. You know, you did the right thing for her, and she gets to go so peacefully because of it." I think I realized at that moment that Kami-sama had helped me fulfill my wish. Not in the exact way I'd imagined, but in a way that mattered deeply to me and my beloved granny. I prayed and prayed for Kami-sama's Nariyuki, which means like outcome of events basically, to become true. And when you look to Kami-sama, I believe strongly that any wish you make, any request that you have will indeed come to you. Maybe not in exactly the way you envision, but Kami-sama knows better. That's why the divine reminder is called the divine reminder. It's always there to remind you of exactly what a person needs to establish a waga kokoro in this life, a heart of joy and peace. I don't need things to go exactly as planned. I just need Kami-sama's arrangements. Then everything will fall into place. Thank you.
Backstage and prayer for peace. Self-giver. Prayer for peace. Through a divine mediator, the divine parent of the universe, Mr. Pray, artists the whole lives are so hard as well. You create such a blessing, wanting us and one another, and mutually harmony. Yet we are listening more, attention has to say, tears are flow. Your heart and the people suffer, but not just sleep or dealing. We are still approaching, assertions in your place, to declare another your will. The peace of the world starts with peace in our hearts. To bring out the final vision, to see the goodness of all. To speak words uncomfortable, allow us to form a peaceful world. We are each to speak with you. through your virgin parents, we pray with hearts as one, both to live in peace and harmony, for to live as one. Greetings. Hello. Thank you very much for attending today's Tenchikano Economic Grand Ceremony of Konko Church of Chicago. Who do you think Tenchikano Kami is? And what Kami wishes for us humans? Tenchikano Kami is said to be three combined deities of sun, moon, and earth. We humans are nourished and sustained and allowed to live through the working of these three deities. Tenchikano Kami is the divine plan of the universe for us all. We all humans being the children of God. Konko taught us, heaven is the Father, and earth is the Mother. Believe that you are being cared for by immortal parents. Then depend on Tenchikano Kami for all things, and think that nothing is impossible. While you are living, pray to Kami for all things. Tenchikano Kami bestowed everything for us or living. Therefore, let us become even more aware of the purpose of life and awaken to the eternal wish of Kami. Then what is the wish of Kami for us? It is clearly stated in the divine call as follows. Kami exists because of people, and people exist because of Kami. Everyone will become forever prosperous through the relationship of mutual reliance between Kami and people. Kami wishes for each human to manifest a world of mutual prosperity between Kami and each one of us. In order to accomplish this purpose task, Kami wishes to have people become aware of the blessing of the wonders by having Konko rising be born throughout the world where the sun shines in every country without exception. Konko is the one who clearly understands the true blessing of the wonders through his or her faith experience. When we seek our final life of faith, we come across one of the important events that he willingly accepted his brother's request to build a Konjin shrine, even though he was possessed by Konjin. Our founder accepted the request from a madman. In other words, he stood in response to the wish of Kami. Later, Kami said it was Kami's first request, and he himself wrote it was the start of his faith. He accepted whatever Kami requested to him since then. His acceptance was so remarkable that Kami even said to him, "There is no way to test you." In 2 years later, he received a divine call. He accepted sincerely even the most difficult ordeal in his life in 1873, 10 years later, when he was ordered to remove the altar fixtures from the Meiji government. During that time, Kami manifested a divine reminder to our founder for each person to live an ordinary life and to reach by themselves human fulfillment with Kami. Soon after Kami revealed, everything that happens is Tenchikano Kami doing. This includes major upheavals. It means all is divine love. We are provided water, air, everything for living. Those are, of course, the blessing of abundance. Besides those things, when we believe that all is divine love, we finally understand the true blessing of abundance. Mrs. Ashton Keith has been an honest believer of the Konko faith since she first visited our church from St. Louis in 2010. The more she has realized Kami's wish for us humans, the deeper wish she had to become a Konko minister. I believe she will be the very one of Konko Daijin, just as Kami wishes to have people become aware of the blessings of heaven and earth by having Konko Daijin be born throughout the world. Here are my prayers right now. By the virtue of mediation of Shodawa Sensei and our partner Kami Konko Daijin, let me pray to Tenji Kanokami that the prosperity of humankind and true world peace will be attained. Please end this cycle of human history of conflict for thousands of years, which has been dominated by human powers, and then establish an era work for peaceful, joyful heart, whereby divinity and humanity can meet together in prayer, live together in gratitude, and delight together in mutual satisfaction. For that, please let me devote myself to respecting each happening as Kami doing with gratitude and deepen my peaceful and joyful heart to the extent it resonates in the heaven earth and in the rest of the world. And please become a great service for as many Konko Daijin as born, as possible born, being born throughout the world. I will continue to recite this prayer of mine in mind to Tenchi Kanokami as often as possible in my daily life. Thank you. Solemn acknowledgement. 一度は入れ、Let's us read the 4 times together. Recessional. Thank you very much. Nice. So now you say it's together. Then from 145 we have a East Regional Center. Zoom. So this is East. So we set the table. 写真撮る。